Well, it looks like they might be planning a massive renovation in and around Madison Square Garden, possibly wrapping the garden in glass. Now, this is plan B for a potential renovation as the original proposal has been shelved. Get this, the original proposal had a $10 billion price tag on it. Transportation centers in New York, I mean, they all cost billions and billions of dollars. But this is an interesting idea. You can take a look at some of the renderings. The idea is to build a grand street level entrance for the new Penn Station. The theater at MSG would be demolished. The Madison Square Garden arena itself would be surrounded by roughly 90-foot tall glass podium. A new mid-block train hall would also be wrapped in an 100-foot tall glass enclosure, creating a sunny arcade for pedestrians moving between West 31st Street and 33rd Street. That is according to a source. So it seems like they've tabled the original idea of a $10 billion renovation to the exterior of Madison Square Garden and also Penn Station. And now they're talking about possibly putting an entire glass enclosure around it. I would imagine this would be multiple billions of dollars. Because, of course, it is in New York City. It's going to cost a ton of money. We learned about Yankee Stadium and Citi Field, both billions and billions of dollars. It just costs so much more to build there. You can see a recent rendering that was just released last month shows some type of glass square surrounding Madison Square Garden, and then it does look like you do have some trees on top of that little area right there as well. That's a pretty nice rendering on what it could potentially look like. Now, in doing research for potential Madison Square Garden renovations, I found some of these older ones that are really intriguing. Take a look at this. This is some type of a square thing. It looks like they've got some trees in the middle of it, but that was a 2005 proposal. This would just be the exterior. They're not changing anything when it comes to the interior. It is very old, but of course, it has received several big-time interior renovations to modernize it, although people have complained recently that it is out of date, but it is still a legendary stadium. And then to my shock, I saw this. This was a week ago. Camping World Stadium renovations receive initial approval for $800 million. They're trying to turn Camping World Stadium into Hard Rock Stadium 2.0. Hard Rock Stadium is where the Miami Dolphins play, and their renovation was really good. They put an awning over top. When you look at what they're trying to do to Camping World Stadium, they're trying to add seats, but basically mimic the exact look to where you've got the four corner areas that are kind of cut out with big screen, scoreboards, and then you do have also the big overhang. This overhang reminds me a lot more of the European soccer model than what Hard Rock Stadium did. Hard Rock Stadium, their angles on the roof are all at like 90 degrees, as opposed to this looks like it's more of a rounded form. Of course, there are a lot of factors that need to be discussed when talking about a Camping World Stadium renovation. This is just an initial phase. That's number one. Almost $1 billion you're going to have to shell out for a renovation in public taxpayer money when there is no permanent tenant at this stadium. It seems a bit ridiculous. A lot of people are starting to wonder, would they just settle for an upper deck renovation because they desperately need that? Whether they get the Jacksonville Jaguars or not, that really doesn't matter. They need an upper deck renovation either way because the seats are just so outdated. It's almost like they're bleacher seats. And this is a stadium that recently received around a $200 million renovation for its lower bowl and to kind of modernize the suites areas as well. So they're trying to dump a ton of money. You have to wonder the situation right now with Orlando, Florida. They've made their pitch with the Orlando Dreamers. They're trying to get an MLB team, whether that's through expansion, whether that's through the Rays relocating, we'll see. They're making their pitch. A lot of people think it's not going to happen, but you also have Orlando trying to possibly lure Jacksonville if Jacksonville does have to play somewhere else as their stadium gets renovated in 2026 and 2027. If this Camping World Stadium gets renovated first before the Jaguars one does. When Jacksonville has to leave, it seems like this would be an obvious choice. It is a little bit far away from the city of Jacksonville. There's also speculation, would they play at the Daytona International Speedway? Seems like such a massive renovation of almost $1 billion. I mean, it would virtually be $1 billion if you add the previous renovation that they had several years ago, for a stadium that does not have a current tenant. Yes, it would make it look really nice. The proposal, if you look at the renderings, it's like hosting the national championship, which, would that make sense over Miami? Because they do have the national championship several times, like 2 times every 10 years, it feels like the national championship is at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. And then the Super Bowl is also like 1 out of every 10 years. Would they try and host the Super Bowl? That would actually be a true neutral site location right there, Camping World Stadium, because it's not even an NFL stadium. An Orange County task force approved the $800 million in tourist development tax spending on the renovations as more bowl games and high-profile concerts are sought to Orlando. That just doesn't make any sense. You're going to spend $800 million for bowl games and concerts. You could just do a big-time renovation to the upper deck. You don't really need to add the awning. This screams to me like this would be if an NFL team wanted a renovation, you would do an $800 million renovation. All that Camping World Stadium really hosts right now is like XFL games. I know they host the Citrus Bowl, but that's once a year. And then they host concerts. They've had WrestleMania once. They're not doing much. You have to start wondering, is it to try and lure Jacksonville? It's an interesting thought. And I would imagine it would be a 2-part renovation happening in multiple years. Not that it really matters because they really don't host very much. It's not like they have a tenant that they have to worry about. But the first part would be getting the entire upper deck ready and laid out. And then year 2 of the renovation would be putting the big-time overhang onto the roof. And then just another college football renovation, because these always seem to pop up. Army has just announced an $145 million restoration project to be completed in time for the 2025 football season. So this is a multi-year thing. The renderings show a revamped concourse, new luxury seating options, and a brand new athletic facility. Also a complete rebuild of the East Stands. A new Victory Plaza is also planned for visitors outside of the stadium gates. And you know what? You look at these, you got to appreciate renderings. I just love how renderings look. It just looks very nice. You've got the nice fall colors. You've got the helicopters, Army, West Point. It just looks like, that's a nice renovation they're doing. I'm sure like the real life photos are not going to look that good, but renderings always look amazing. And you can see the water right next to the stadium. You know what this reminded me of? How the renovation looks in terms of their stands reminds me of MLS. It's like the exact same model of what MLS is doing in terms of capacity, in terms of close to the action with the luxury seating, but that is coming for Army as well. So guys, the big thing that I saw today, Madison Square Garden possibly getting a giant glass square around it to enclose it as part of a massive multi-billion-dollar renovation, although who knows if this is really going to happen, because this is the option B. Option A was originally a $10 billion project. All of this is focused on transportation. This is not the interior of Madison Square Garden, but it is going to affect it, especially the exterior if this gets done and a giant glass structure encompasses it. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.